The morning sun streamed through the windows of LAX airport as Vivian Chen checked her appearance one last time in the restroom mirror. Her navy uniform was perfectly pressed, her hair neatly tucked into a bun and her makeup flawless. 15 years as a senior flight attendant for Pacific Airlines had taught her the importance of first impressions. She straightened her gold wings pin and practiced her professional smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes but fooled most passengers. Another day in the sky, she whispered to herself, before heading to the pre-flight briefing. Vivian took pride in her position. She wasn't just any flight attendant. She worked exclusively in first class on international flights. She knew the preferences of regular business travelers and could recite the wine list from memory. Her colleagues often joked that she could spot a first-timer in first class from a mile away. Flight 247 to New York is fully booked in first, announced Tom, the lead flight attendant during their briefing. We've got 3 VIPs, including a tech CEO and an actor. Vivian nodded, mentally preparing herself for the high expectations of wealthy passengers. She enjoyed the challenge, though part of her had grown somewhat jaded over the years. The entitlement of some first-class passengers could be exhausting. Boarding began 30 minutes later. Vivian stood at the entrance of the first-class cabin, greeting passengers with her practiced smile. The tech CEO arrived first, dressed in an expensive suit and barely looking up from his phone as he mumbled a greeting. 2 well-dressed women followed, then a politician Vivian recognized from TV. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard," she said to each one, directing them to their seats and offering to hang their jackets. As the boarding process continued, Vivian noticed a man approaching first class wearing jeans, a simple black t-shirt and a worn baseball cap. Her first thought was that he might be lost. Economy passengers sometimes wandered into first class by mistake, but as he got closer, she recognized the face partly hidden under the cap. It was Keanu Reeves. Vivian had served celebrities before, but she was still surprised by his casual appearance. Most stars dressed to impress, even on flights. Keanu, however, looked like he could be any regular person on the street. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. Welcome aboard. You're in seat 2A, Vivian said, maintaining her professional tone. Keanu smiled warmly. "Thank you," he said in his distinctive gentle voice. He didn't have a carry-on, just a small backpack that he kept with him. As he settled into his seat, Vivian noticed something around his neck, a leather cord with what looked like a handmade wooden pendant. It seemed oddly out of place with the luxury of the first-class cabin, like something you might buy at a street fair or craft market. Once all the first-class passengers were seated, Vivian began the pre-flight drink service. She moved efficiently through the cabin, taking orders and making small talk with the passengers. "Sparkling water, please," Keanu requested when she reached him. "Of course," Vivian replied. As she poured the water into a crystal glass, her eyes were drawn again to the wooden pendant. It didn't look expensive or particularly well made, just a simple, somewhat crudely carved oval piece with what might have been initials etched into it. Something about it irked her. Here was a multi-millionaire actor, flying first class, wearing what looked like a child's art project around his neck. In her mind, it didn't fit with the refined atmosphere she worked hard to maintain in her cabin. "Interesting necklace," she commented, placing his water on the small table. Her tone carried a hint of condescension that she didn't bother to hide. Keanu's hand moved to touch the pendant briefly. "Thank you," he said simply, either missing or ignoring her tone. Vivian should have left it at that, but something pushed her to continue. Perhaps it was the accumulated fatigue of years dealing with the rich and famous, or maybe it was the contrast between his casual appearance and the luxury surrounding him. "It's quite unique," she added with a subtle emphasis that transformed the word into something less than a compliment. "Arts and crafts must be a nice hobby." The passenger across the aisle, a businessman in his 50s, glanced up at her comment. Vivian realized she had spoken louder than intended. A moment of awkward silence followed. Keanu's expression didn't change. "It's special to me," he replied quietly, his voice kind despite her obvious mockery. Vivian nodded stiffly and moved on to the next passenger, but she could feel eyes on her back. The businessman was watching her with a slight frown, and her fellow flight attendant, Pete, had overheard the exchange from a few seats away. "Smooth," Pete whispered sarcastically as they passed each other in the aisle. Vivian ignored him and continued with her duties, but a small knot of discomfort had formed in her stomach. Had she gone too far? She glanced back at Keanu, who was now reading a book, seemingly unbothered by her comment. It's not like he'd care what I think anyway, she told herself. Celebrities were used to much worse from the tabloids. The plane began taxiing, and Vivian went through the motions of the safety demonstration with practiced precision. Throughout it all, she noticed that Keanu paid full attention, unlike most first-class passengers who typically ignored the demonstration in favor of their phones or magazines. Once they reached cruising altitude, Vivian began preparing the drink service. As she arranged the premium liquor bottles on her cart, Pete approached her in the galley. "What was that about?" he asked in a low voice. "What?" Vivian pretended not to understand. "You know what? That comment about his necklace." Vivian shrugged. "Just making conversation." Pete raised an eyebrow. "Didn't sound like friendly conversation to me." "Oh, come on. These celebrities fly first class in outfits that cost more than our monthly salary. And then he shows up in a t-shirt with some craft fair necklace. It's just inconsistent. Since when do you care what passengers wear?" Pete asked. "And it's Keanu Reeves. Everyone knows he's different from other celebrities." "Different how?" Vivian asked, arranging glasses on her cart. "For one, he's known for being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. Gives millions to charity, takes pay cuts so other actors can be hired, rides the subway like a normal person." Vivian felt that knot in her stomach tighten. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said defensively. Pete just shook his head and returned to his section of the cabin. As Vivian pushed her cart down the aisle, she noticed several passengers looking at her differently. Had they all heard her comment? Or was she just being paranoid? When she reached Keanu's seat again, she put on her most professional smile. "Would you care for another drink, Mr. Reeves?" "Just water is fine, thank you," he replied with the same gentle politeness as before. No hint of offense or anger in his voice. As she poured his water, Vivian noticed the businessmen across the aisle watching the interaction closely. When their eyes met, he gave her a disapproving look before returning to his laptop. The rest of the drink service continued without incident, but Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a mistake. It wasn't like her to make personal comments about passengers' appearances, especially negative ones. She prided herself on her professionalism. When she returned to the galley, she found herself scrolling through news articles about Keanu on her phone during her break. Stories about his generosity, his humble lifestyle despite his wealth, and his kindness to fans and crew members on his films. A heaviness settled in her chest. She had misjudged him based on his appearance, something she had always hated when others did it to her. The pendant she had mocked so carelessly might have significant meaning to him. Perhaps it was a gift from someone special or a memento with personal value. "First meal service in 10, Pete announced, interrupting her thoughts. Vivian put away her phone and prepared for the next phase of the flight, determined to make up for her earlier behavior with impeccable service. But as she glanced down the aisle at Keanu, who was now helping an elderly passenger place a bag in the overhead bin, she had a feeling that her small moment of unkindness wouldn't be so easily forgotten. Not by the other passengers, not by Pete, and certainly not by herself. What she didn't know yet was just how much she would come to regret those few careless words. The meal service went smoother than Vivian expected. She moved through the first-class cabin with practiced efficiency, serving gourmet dishes and refilling wine glasses. When she reached Keanu's seat, she was extra careful with her words and tone. "Would you care for the chicken or pasta today, Mr. Reeves?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral and professional. "The pasta would be great, thank you," he replied with a small smile. As Vivian set his meal down, she noticed the wooden pendant again. In the cabin's soft lighting, she could see it had more detail than she'd first thought. There were small carvings along the edges and what looked like a simple design in the center, possibly a tree or a figure. She quickly looked away before he could catch her staring. Throughout the meal service, Vivian kept glancing back at Keanu. Unlike many celebrities she'd served before, he didn't make special requests or complain about the food. He ate quietly, occasionally looking out the window at the clouds below. There was something calming about his presence, a stark contrast to the business people furiously typing on laptops or the influencer a few rows back taking photos of her meal for social media. "He's exactly like people say," Pete whispered when they met in the galley. "Super down to earth." Vivian nodded, the knot of regret in her stomach growing tighter. I shouldn't have said that about his necklace. No, you shouldn't have, Pete agreed, but without malice. But we all have bad days. Just be extra nice for the rest of the flight. The plane hit a patch of turbulence as they cleaned up the meal service. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged on, and Vivian quickly secured the meal carts before taking her jump seat. As the plane bounced through rough air, she noticed a young woman across from Keanu looking increasingly nervous, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Once the turbulence subsided, Vivian was surprised to see Keanu leaning slightly toward the anxious passenger, speaking quietly to her. The woman's tight expression gradually relaxed, and she even laughed softly at something he said. By the time Vivian passed by with the trash cart, the woman looked completely at ease. "First time flying?" Vivian asked her as she collected the empty cups. "Is it that obvious?" The woman replied with a slight blush. "Mr. Reeves was just telling me about a film he shot where they had to fly through a hurricane. Makes this turbulence seem like nothing." Vivian smiled politely and moved on, but she felt another twinge of shame. Here she was, being paid to make passengers comfortable, while the man she'd mocked was doing her job better than she was. The next few hours passed without incident. The cabin lights were dimmed to allow passengers to rest, and Vivian kept busy with small tasks, occasionally checking if anyone needed anything. She noticed Keanu didn't sleep. Instead, he read his book, pausing occasionally to look out the window or touch the wooden pendant around his neck. During one of these moments, Vivian happened to be walking by with a water pitcher. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt compelled to say something, anything, to ease her conscience. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Reeves?" "Another pillow, perhaps?" "I'm fine, thank you," he replied. Then after a moment's hesitation, he added, "Actually, I was wondering if you had any tea." "Of course," Vivian said, relieved to have something to do for him. "We have chamomile green English breakfast." "Chamomile would be perfect." "I'll bring it right away," she said, turning to head back to the galley. "You know," Keanu said softly, stopping her, "being thousands of feet in the air always reminds me how small we all are. How the little things that bother us don't really matter in the big picture." Vivian stood frozen for a moment, unsure if his comment was directed at her earlier behavior or just a general observation. His expression gave nothing away. It was kind, thoughtful, but unreadable. "Yes, that's very true," she managed to say before escaping to the galley. As she prepared his tea, Vivian's hands trembled slightly. Was he trying to tell her something? Or was she reading too much into a casual remark from a passenger known for being philosophical? When she returned with the tea, Keanu thanked her with the same gentle politeness he'd shown all flight. No coldness, no passive-aggressive tone that she might have used in his place, just simple kindness. The businessman across the aisle, however, was not as forgiving. When Vivian offered him a drink refill, he declined with a curt, "No thank you," and immediately returned to his laptop, making it clear their interaction was over. She had definitely lost his good opinion. A few rows ahead, the influencer was now openly recording a video on her phone, angling it to capture Keanu in the background. Vivian should have asked her to stop. Recording other passengers without permission was against airline policy. But the woman was being discreet, and Vivian didn't want to create another scene. "Isn't that your job?" Pete whispered when he noticed the situation. "To tell her to stop filming?" Vivian sighed. "I'll handle it." She approached the influencer's seat and bent down slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have a policy against recording other passengers. I'll have to ask you to stop." The woman looked up with practiced innocence. "Oh, I was just recording my review of the flight service." Her emphasis on the word service made it clear she'd heard Vivian's earlier comment to Keanu. Nevertheless, "I need to ask you to stop," Vivian insisted quietly. The woman put her phone down with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. By the way, I have quite a following on social media. People love hearing about my travel experiences, both good and bad." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Vivian walked away, her face burning. This flight was turning into a nightmare, and there were still 3 hours left before they landed in New York. In the galley, Vivian took a moment to collect herself. 15 years of flying, and she couldn't remember a time when she'd felt this off balance, all because of one thoughtless comment. "You okay?" Pete asked, handing her a cup of water. "I messed up," she admitted, "and now that influencer is threatening to post about it." Pete shrugged. "People post complaints about flights all the time. It'll blow over." But something told Vivian it wouldn't be that simple. The woman hadn't been filming the flight service. She'd been filming Keanu. And if she had caught Vivian's comment on camera, the thought made her stomach turn. For the remainder of the flight, Vivian did her best to be professional and attentive. She offered Keanu fresh tea without being asked, brought extra pillows to the elderly passenger he had helped earlier, and maintained a polite demeanor with everyone, even the influencer, who continued to watch her with a calculating smile. As they began their descent into New York, Vivian noticed Keanu speaking with another passenger, a middle-aged woman who seemed deeply engaged in their conversation. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but the woman's expression was one of sympathy and interest. Occasionally, Keanu would touch the wooden pendant as he spoke, and the woman would nod understandingly. "Prepare for landing," the captain's voice announced over the intercom. Vivian moved through the cabin doing final checks. When she passed Keanu and the woman, their conversation paused briefly. The woman looked up at Vivian with an expression that seemed almost pitying. It was unsettling. As the plane touched down at JFK, Vivian felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that the flight was over, but dread at the thought of what might happen once everyone disembarked. Would the influencer really post something about her? Would it matter if she did? "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York," she announced, forcing a smile as passengers began gathering their belongings. Keanu was in no rush to leave. He waited patiently as others pushed past, his book tucked under one arm. When he finally stood to exit, Vivian found herself standing near the door, preparing to give the customary farewell. "Thank you for flying with us today, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice professional but lacking the warmth she usually managed to fake. Keanu paused, looking at her directly for what felt like the first time since her comment about his necklace. His eyes were kind but somehow penetrating, as if he could see the regret and anxiety churning inside her. "Thank you for the excellent service," he said softly, then touching the wooden pendant briefly. He added, "Sometimes the things that seem simplest on the surface have the deepest meaning." With that, he walked off the plane, leaving Vivian standing by the exit, a strange feeling washing over her, as if something significant had just happened, though she couldn't quite grasp what it was. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning of what would become the most challenging and transformative experience of her career. After the last passenger disembarked, Vivian began her post-flight duties mechanically. Her mind kept replaying Keanu's parting words. Sometimes the things that seem simplest on the surface have the deepest meaning. Had he been talking about the necklace? About her? Or was she overthinking a casual remark? "Earth to Vivian," Pete waved a hand in front of her face. "We need to reset the cabin. Flight back to LA leaves in 2 hours. "Right, sorry," she said, snapping back to reality. They worked quickly, straightening seats and preparing the cabin for the cleaning crew. "So," Pete said casually as they collected forgotten items from seat pockets. "That was something." "What was?" Vivian asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "The whole Keanu situation. I've never seen you like that before. You're usually so careful." Vivian sighed. "I don't know what got into me. It was a stupid thing to say." "Well, it's over now," Pete said with a shrug. "Unless that influencer actually posts something, which I doubt. People make empty threats all the time." Vivian nodded, but something told her this wasn't over. The woman's calculating smile, the businessman's disapproving looks, the way the other passenger had been deep in conversation with Keanu. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite see yet. After completing their duties, the crew had a short layover in New York. Most headed to the hotel for rest. But Vivian decided to grab coffee at an airport cafe first. She needed time to clear her head. As she sat with her latte, she pulled out her phone and found herself searching for information about Keanu Reeves. She'd known the basics. Famous actor, seemed nice in interviews, lived relatively modestly for a Hollywood star. But there was clearly more to him than she'd realized. Article after article described his generosity, his kindness to film crews and fans, his personal tragedies, losing his best friend to drugs, his girlfriend to a car accident, his baby born stillborn. Through it all, he'd maintained a reputation for being one of the most genuine, humble people in an industry known for ego and excess, and she'd mocked him over a necklace. Vivian put her phone down, feeling worse than before. She noticed a notification from her Instagram account, several new followers and a handful of direct messages. Odd. She rarely posted and had only a modest following, mostly other flight attendants and old friends. She opened the app and froze. Her most recent post, a sunset photo from a flight last week, had hundreds of new comments. Heart-pounding, she clicked to read them. "Aren't you the flight attendant who was rude to Keanu? Just saw the video. How could you mock someone like that? Disgusting. This is why I fly Delta video? What video?" With shaking fingers, Vivian searched her name on Twitter. The results made her stomach drop. A 30-second clip showed her leaning over Keanu's seat, her voice clearly audible. "It's quite unique. Arts and crafts must be a nice hobby." The camera then panned to show Keanu's face, his polite but slightly hurt expression, before cutting back to Vivian's smug smile as she walked away. The video had over 500,000 views and was growing by the minute. The comments were brutal. Fire her immediately. Keanu is a national treasure and she treated him like garbage. That necklace probably has a deep personal meaning. What a heartless woman. Vivian felt sick. The influencer had posted it after all and it was spreading like wildfire. She quickly checked her work email and found a message from her supervisor. "Call me ASAP regarding the social media situation." This couldn't be happening. 15 years of spotless service, and now her career was potentially ruined because of one thoughtless comment. Her phone rang. It was Pete. "Have you seen it?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," she whispered, her throat tight. "It's bad, Viv. Really bad. Lisa from HR called me looking for you. They're getting flooded with complaints." Vivian closed her eyes. "What should I do?" "Call Lisa, and maybe stay off social media for a while." After hanging up, Vivian gathered her courage and called HR. The conversation was brief and to the point. She was suspended pending an investigation and would need to attend a disciplinary meeting when they returned to LA. The company was drafting a public statement distancing themselves from her behavior. In less than 3 hours, her life had been turned upside down. Back at the hotel, Vivian couldn't sleep. She kept checking the video, watching the view count climb higher. Worse, entertainment news sites were now picking up the story. One headline read, "Flight attendant mocks Keanu Reeves' sentimental necklace, internet responds." Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Turn on entertainment tonight. Channel 4. Warily, she switched on the hotel TV and found the channel. The host was mid-sentence. Exclusive interview with the passenger who spoke with Keanu Reeves about the meaning behind the necklace. The camera cut to the middle-aged woman who had been sitting near Keanu on the flight, the one he'd been deep in conversation with. "He was very open about it," the woman explained. "He told me the necklace was made by his goddaughter, Lily. She's 8 years old and has been battling leukemia for the past 2 years." Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. "The wood is from a special tree in her backyard," the woman continued. "Her parents were going to have to cut it down because it was dying and she was devastated. So she asked if she could keep a piece of it. She carved this pendant herself during her hospital stays and gave it to Keanu before a major surgery she had last month." The host nodded sympathetically. "And he wears it all the time?" "He said he promised her he would never take it off until she was cancer-free. It's a symbol of hope for both of them. He considers it more valuable than any expensive jewelry he could buy." The camera returned to the host. A beautiful story that makes the flight attendant's mockery even more shocking. "We've reached out to Pacific Airlines for comment." Vivian turned off the TV, her hands trembling. She had ridiculed a handmade gift from a sick child. No wonder people were outraged. She was outraged at herself. Unable to bear being alone with her thoughts, she went down to the hotel lobby. A few other crew members were there, including Pete, who waved her over. "I saw the interview," he said quietly. "I can't believe this is happening," Vivian replied, her voice hollow. "I've ruined everything." Pete handed her a cup of tea. "You made a mistake. A big one, yeah, but still just a mistake. People have come back from worse." "Not when it involves Keanu Reeves and a sick child," she said bitterly. "The internet will never forgive me." "Maybe not the internet," Pete agreed, "but you still need to forgive yourself eventually." A young man sitting nearby looked up suddenly. "Hey, aren't you—" "No," Pete cut in firmly. "She's not. Mind your business." The man looked skeptical but returned to his phone. Vivian pulled her hood up, suddenly aware that her face was probably recognizable now. "I can't go back to LA tomorrow," she whispered. "Everyone on the flight will have seen the video." "I'll talk to the chief flight attendant," Pete assured her. "Maybe they can assign someone else for the return flight." That night, Vivian barely slept. She kept thinking about Keanu's goddaughter, imagining a sick little girl carefully carving a piece of wood during long hospital stays, pouring love and hope into a simple pendant. And then Vivian had dismissed it as arts and crafts. By morning, the situation had somehow gotten even worse. The video had been viewed millions of times, her name was trending on Twitter, and Pacific Airlines had issued a statement. "We are aware of the incident involving one of our flight attendants. This behavior does not reflect our values, and appropriate action is being taken. We sincerely apologize to Mr. Reeves and all our customers." Her phone was flooded with messages from friends and colleagues, some offering support, others expressing disappointment. Even her mother had called, having seen the story on the morning news. "I raised you better than that, Vivian," she had said, the hurt in her voice worse than any angry comment online. Pete had managed to get her taken off the return flight, and the airline booked her on a different flight back to LA the following day. She spent the extra day hiding in her hotel room, ordering room service and avoiding social media, though she couldn't resist checking the video periodically. The view count was now at $5.7 million. Late that afternoon, she received an email that made her heart skip. The disciplinary meeting had been moved up, and now included the company's director of public relations. This wasn't just about employee conduct anymore. It was about damage control for the airline. As she packed her bag for the flight home, Vivian wondered if she would even have a job by the end of the week. 15 years of her life dedicated to Pacific Airlines, and it might all end because of 30 seconds of thoughtlessness. She picked up her phone one last time before leaving the hotel, steeling herself to check the latest developments. A new headline caught her eye. Keanu Reeves responds to flight attendant controversy. Her finger hovered over the link. Did she really want to know what he had said? What if he was angry? What if he had condemned her publicly? Taking a deep breath, Vivian clicked the link, preparing for the worst. The article loaded, and Vivian held her breath as she began to read. Actor Keanu Reeves has finally addressed the viral video showing a Pacific Airlines flight attendant mocking the handmade necklace given to him by his 8-year-old goddaughter, who is battling leukemia. Vivian's stomach tightened. When put so bluntly, her actions sounded even worse. In a brief statement released through his representative, Reeves said, "I'm saddened that this private moment has become public. The pendant is indeed very special to me. However, I don't believe in public shaming, and I hope people will show the flight attendant the same grace and understanding that I try to practice daily. We all have bad days and say things we regret." Vivian read the statement 3 times, not quite believing it. He wasn't calling for her firing. He wasn't condemning her. Instead, he was asking people to forgive her. She scrolled through the comments section beneath the article. Most ignored Keanu's plea, continuing to attack her, but a few voices had shifted. If Keanu can forgive her, maybe we should too. Still not cool what she did, but respect to Keanu for being the bigger person. This is why we love him, always taking the high road. A notification popped up on her screen, an email from Pacific Airlines confirming her flight change. In a few hours, she would be heading back to LA to face the music. The airport was busy when she arrived, and Vivian kept her head down, sunglasses on, hood up. She felt like everyone was staring at her, though logically she knew most people probably hadn't seen the video or wouldn't recognize her from it. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, judged. She made it through security without incident and found a quiet corner near her gate. Her phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "As well as can be expected," she replied. "Did you see his statement?" Yes, classic Keanu, too good for this world. Vivian felt tears prick at her eyes. Even now, after everything, Pete was being kind to her. Keanu was being kind to her. She didn't deserve it. "What do you think will happen tomorrow?" she texted back, referring to the disciplinary meeting. Pete's response was slow in coming. "Hard to say. The PR team is in panic mode, but your record is spotless otherwise. 15 years, no complaints. That has to count for something. But would it be enough?" The video had now been viewed over 8 million times. It had been featured on national news. Pacific Airlines was facing a PR nightmare, and the easiest solution would be to cut her loose. Her flight was called for boarding. Vivian waited until the last moment to board, slipping onto the plane after most passengers were already seated. She felt strange being on the other side, being a passenger instead of crew. The flight attendant who checked her ticket gave no sign of recognizing her, which was a small mercy. As the plane took off, Vivian stared out the window at New York disappearing beneath the clouds. 3 days ago, her biggest worry had been whether she'd have enough time between flights to do laundry. Now her entire career, her reputation, her livelihood was in jeopardy. Her seatmate, an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticed her distress. "First time flying, dear?" Vivian almost laughed at the irony. "No, I've flown many times." "Ah, just nervous then?" "I still get jitters myself, even at my age." Vivian managed a small smile. "Just going through some personal stuff." The woman patted her hand. "Whatever it is, this too shall pass. Nothing lasts forever. Not the good times and not the bad ones either." The simple wisdom in those words struck Vivian deeply. She thanked the woman and closed her eyes, trying to get some rest before the storm that awaited her in LA. When they landed, Vivian turned on her phone to find a new email from HR confirming her disciplinary meeting for 9 a.m. the next morning. The email was formal, detailing the complaint against her and listing potential outcomes including termination of employment. Vivian took a rideshare home, barely noticing the driver's attempts at small talk. Her apartment felt strange after the chaos of the past few days. Too quiet, too normal, as if it belonged to a different life. She checked her mailbox out of habit and found it stuffed with flyers and bills. Normal life had continued while hers had imploded. She didn't sleep well that night. Her dreams were a jumble of faces. Keanu looking at her with those kind, sad eyes. The influencer's calculating smile. Her supervisor's disappointment. A small girl she'd never met, carving a pendant from a beloved tree while lying in a hospital bed. Morning came too quickly. Vivian dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy blue suit she usually reserved for interviews and important meetings. Today certainly qualified as important. She applied her makeup with extra care, as if looking put together might somehow protect her from what was coming. The Pacific Airlines headquarters was a sleek building near LAX. Vivian had been there many times for training sessions and staff meetings, but never for something like this. She checked in with reception and was directed to a conference room on the 4th floor. Her supervisor, Nancy, was waiting outside. "Vivian," she said with a nod that was neither friendly nor hostile. "They're ready for you." Inside the conference room sat 4 people, the head of HR, Lisa, the director of public relations, whose name she couldn't remember, the chief flight attendant, Roy, and a woman Vivian didn't recognize, possibly from legal. "Please have a seat," Lisa said, gesturing to a chair facing all 4 of them. The meeting began formally, with Lisa recapping the incident and the subsequent social media firestorm. The PR director then took over, explaining the damage to the airline's reputation and the thousands of complaints they'd received. "Pacific Airlines has built its brand on exceptional customer service," he said sternly. "This incident has undermined years of careful brand building." Vivian nodded, keeping her eyes fixed on the table. What could she say? He wasn't wrong. "Before we continue," Roy cut in, "I think we should let Vivian tell her side of the story." All eyes turned to her. Vivian took a deep breath. "I don't have an excuse," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "What I said was thoughtless and unkind. I've spent 15 years trying to provide the best possible service to every passenger, regardless of who they are. I failed to do that with Mr. Reeves, and I'm deeply sorry." She looked up, meeting their eyes one by one. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I understand the position I've put the company in, and I'll accept whatever decision you make. I just want you to know that this one moment doesn't reflect who I am or how I typically treat our passengers." The room was silent for a moment. Then the unfamiliar woman, definitely legal, spoke up. "We've reviewed your employment record, Ms. Chen. As you said, 15 years without a single complaint is significant. However, this incident has created substantial negative publicity for the airline." Vivian's heart sank. This was it. She was about to be fired. "That said," the woman continued, "Mr. Reeves's statement asking for leniency has somewhat mitigated the public relations damage." The PR director nodded grudgingly. "Yes, the tone online has shifted slightly. Some are calling for us to respect his wishes. Others still want blood, so to speak. Lisa leaned forward. We've discussed this at length, Vivian. Termination was certainly on the table, was, past tense. Vivian felt a flicker of hope. However, Lisa continued, in light of your spotless record and Mr. Reeves' statement, we've decided on a different approach. Roy slid a document across the table. 2-month suspension without pay. Mandatory sensitivity training. When you return, you'll be on probation for 6 months, and you'll be reassigned to domestic economy flights. It was a severe punishment. The loss of income would hurt, and the demotion from international first class to domestic economy was a significant step down in both status and pay. But it wasn't termination. She still had a job. Additionally, the PR director added, we want you to record a public apology for our social channels, something sincere that might help repair the damage. Vivian nodded. Of course. I'll do whatever it takes. This is your one chance, Vivian, Nancy said firmly. Any further incidents, no matter how minor, will result in immediate termination. After signing the paperwork, Vivian left the building feeling numb. She had kept her job, barely, but the road ahead would be difficult. 2 months without income, a public apology that would put her face out there even more, and when she finally returned to work, she would be starting over at the bottom, working alongside new hires with a fraction of her experience. Still, as she walked to the bus stop, her rideshare budget now gone along with her salary, she felt a strange sense of relief. The worst had happened and she had survived. She still had a chance to rebuild. Her phone buzzed with a text from Pete. How did it go? She quickly typed back. Suspended for 2 months, then domestic economy. Could have been worse. Much worse, he replied. We'll get through this. Call me later? Vivian smiled slightly at the we. At least she wasn't completely alone. When she got home, she sat down at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. If she was going to record a public apology, she needed to get the words right. This wasn't just about saving her job anymore. It was about making amends for the hurt she had caused. As she began to type, a notification popped up on her screen, a news alert about Keanu Reeves. Her finger hovered over it, hesitating before she clicked. The headline made her breath catch. Keanu Reeves visits hospital as goddaughter completes final round of chemotherapy. The article included a photo that nearly broke Vivian's heart. Keanu sitting beside a small, thin girl with a bright smile despite her obvious illness. Around his neck was the wooden pendant, prominently displayed, and around hers was a matching one. The caption read, Actor Keanu Reeves wears the matching pendant his goddaughter Lily made for him as she celebrates completing her final round of chemotherapy. Doctors are optimistic about her prognosis. Vivian stared at the image, tears welling in her eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside her. This wasn't just about saving her job or her reputation anymore. She needed to make this right, truly right, in a way that no scripted public apology could accomplish. She minimized the document she'd been working on and opened a new one. At the top, she typed, Ideas for Children's Cancer Foundation fundraiser. 3 months had passed since the incident that changed Vivian's life. The first few weeks had been the hardest, recording the public apology video, watching the comments roll in, some forgiving, many not, and figuring out how to stretch her savings to cover 2 months without pay. But somewhere in that difficult time, Vivian had found a new purpose. The idea that had come to her the day of her disciplinary meeting had grown into something real. She had spent her suspension volunteering at the children's hospital near her apartment, reading to kids in the oncology ward and helping with art therapy sessions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. More importantly, she had been working with a small team of other flight attendants. Pete had been the first to volunteer, to organize a fundraiser for children's cancer research. They had named it Pendants of Hope, inspired by the necklace that had started it all. Today was her first day back at work. As promised, she had been reassigned to domestic economy. The uniform felt both familiar and strange as she pinned her wings to her lapel. No longer the senior first-class flight attendant she had been for years, but back to where she had started her career. Ready for this? Pete asked as they met in the crew room at LAX. He had requested to be on her flight today, a small kindness that meant more than he probably realized. As ready as I'll ever be, Vivian replied, adjusting her scarf nervously. Do you think people will recognize me? It's been 3 months, Pete reminded her. The internet moves on quickly. Besides, you look different. She did look different. Her hair was shorter now, cut into a practical bob during her suspension when she realized she couldn't afford her usual salon visits. But the changes went deeper than that. There was a softness to her expression that hadn't been there before, a humility in the way she carried herself. Their flight that day was a short hop to San Francisco. As passengers boarded, Vivian held her breath, half expecting someone to point or whisper. But the moments ticked by without incident. People were too busy with their own lives to notice her, or if they did recognize her, they didn't care enough to make a scene. She performed her duties with careful attention, making a point to really see each passenger, not just as a seat number, but as a person with their own story. The elderly gentleman in 14C who needed help stowing his bag, the young mother in 22A trying to soothe a fussy baby, the teenager in 17F who looked nervous about flying. It was exhausting in a way her job had never been before, this level of presence, of genuine care, but also strangely fulfilling. By the time they landed in San Francisco, Vivian felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not the old pride of being at the top of her field, serving celebrities and CEOs in first class, but something quieter and more authentic. Not so bad, right? Pete said as they prepared for the return flight. Vivian smiled. Not bad at all. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Vivian worked her domestic routes during the day and spent her evenings finalizing details for the fundraiser. The airline's PR department, seeing an opportunity for positive publicity, had even offered to help, providing a venue and promotional support. The event was scheduled for a Saturday evening at a hotel near LAX. Vivian had spent the morning setting up, arranging silent auction items donated by local businesses and making sure everything was perfect. Their goal was modest, $10,000 for the children's cancer ward where Lily, Keanu's goddaughter, had been treated. As guests began to arrive, mostly airline employees and their families, with a few local businesses that had contributed, Vivian stood by the entrance nervously greeting people. She still wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, especially given how she had ended up there. "This is amazing," Nancy, her supervisor, said as she surveyed the room. Their relationship had thawed somewhat in recent weeks as Vivian had proven her commitment to changing. "I wouldn't have thought you had it in you, Chen." Vivian smiled at the backhanded compliment. "I wouldn't have thought so either." The evening progressed smoothly. Pete gave a short speech about the children's hospital and their needs. A doctor from the oncology department spoke about new treatments being developed. The silent auction items were generating healthy bids. Vivian was checking the bid sheets when a murmur ran through the crowd. She looked up to see what had caused the stir and froze. Standing in the doorway, dressed in a simple black suit, was Keanu Reeves. The room fell silent as he made his way toward the small stage where the speakers had been presenting. Vivian's heart pounded in her chest. She had sent an invitation to his management team, of course, but never expected he would actually come. Keanu approached the microphone. "I heard about what you're doing here," he said, his voice soft but carrying through the silent room. "And I wanted to support it." He spoke briefly about his goddaughter, about her courage during treatment, about the importance of research and funding. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, which he handed to the doctor from the oncology department. "A small contribution," he said simply. Later, Vivian would learn it was a check for $50,000. As applause filled the room, Keanu stepped down from the stage. People moved toward him, eager to speak with him, but he made his way through the crowd with purpose, heading directly for Vivian. She wanted to run, to hide, to be anywhere but there. What could she possibly say to this man she had mocked so thoughtlessly, who had responded with such grace? But there was nowhere to go. He stopped in front of her, and the crowd around them seemed to sense the importance of the moment, drawing back to give them space. "Mr. Reeves," Vivian began, her voice barely above a whisper. I received your letter," he interrupted gently. It was very thoughtful, the letter. She had written it the day after her disciplinary meeting, pouring out her regret and apology. She'd sent it through the airline's PR department, who had contacts at his agency, but she had never known if it reached him. "I meant every word," she said. Keanu nodded, touching the wooden pendant that still hung around his neck. "I can see that." A small silence fell between them, heavy with meaning. "How is Lily?" Vivian asked finally, genuinely wanting to know. His face brightened at the question. She's doing well? Her latest scans were clear. The doctors are optimistic. I'm so glad, Vivian said, and meant it with her whole heart. He glanced around at the fundraiser, taking in the decorations, the silent auction items, the sign explaining where the money would go. You did all this? I had help, Vivian said, gesturing toward Pete, who was watching their interaction from across the room with undisguised curiosity. But yes, it was my idea. After everything that happened, I needed to do something that mattered. Keanu smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. It matters. They talked for a few more minutes about the children's hospital, about the patients Vivian had met during her volunteer work, about the art therapy program she hoped their fundraiser could help expand. It was surreal, standing there having a normal conversation with the man whose necklace she had mocked only 3 months earlier. As he turned to leave, Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled something out. Lily asked me to give you this, he said, holding out his hand. In his palm lay a small wooden pendant, similar to the one he wore but with a different design carved into it, a simple pair of wings. She makes them now for people who are trying to do better, he explained. People who are learning to fly again after falling. Vivian took the pendant with trembling fingers. Please thank her for me, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. After he left, the fundraiser continued with renewed energy, everyone buzzing about Keanu's appearance and generous donation. By the end of the night, they had raised over $75,000, far beyond their modest goal. As Vivian and Pete packed up the last of the decorations, she touched the wooden pendant now hanging around her neck. I still can't believe he came, Pete said, shaking his head in wonder. I can't believe any of this, Vivian replied honestly. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over because of one stupid mistake. Now look at all this. She gestured at the room, at the total on the donation board, at the pendant around her neck. You turned it around, Pete said. You could have just done the minimum. Made your apology, served your suspension, come back to work with your head down. But you did something more. Vivian hadn't thought of it that way before. In her mind, she had simply been trying to make amends, to balance the scales somehow for her thoughtless behavior. But perhaps Pete was right. Perhaps there was something to be proud of in how she had responded to her lowest moment. The following Monday, Vivian was back on a plane, serving drinks in economy class. The job was physically harder than first class. More passengers, fewer amenities, longer hours. But somehow she found herself enjoying it more than she had enjoyed her previous position in years. There was an authenticity to her interactions now, a genuine interest in the people she served. During her break, she checked her phone and found an email from the PR director, the same man who had been ready to fire her 3 months ago. The Pendants of Hope fundraiser has generated significant positive publicity for the airline, it read. We're interested in making it an annual event with you as the lead organizer. Additionally, we're considering featuring your story in our internal newsletter as an example of growth and redemption. Please let me know if you're amenable to this. Vivian smiled to herself. Redemption. Was that what this was? It felt both bigger and smaller than that word suggested. Bigger in the sense that it had changed everything about how she saw herself and her place in the world. Smaller in the sense that it was just the beginning of a longer journey. As the plane began its descent, Vivian moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and tray tables. She paused briefly next to a young girl around Lily's age, who was looking out the window with wonder as the clouds parted to reveal the city below. First time flying? Vivian asked gently. The girl nodded, eyes wide. It's magical, isn't it? Like being a bird. The girl smiled and touched Vivian's wooden pendant, which had slipped out from beneath her scarf. Pretty, she said. It is, Vivian agreed, tucking it carefully back into place next to her heart. It reminds me that we can all learn to fly again even when we fall. As she continued down the aisle, Vivian felt a sense of peace wash over her. Her path forward wouldn't be easy. The internet had a long memory, and there would always be people who knew her only as that flight attendant who mocked Keanu Reeves. But for the first time since that fateful flight, she felt hopeful about her future. She had made a terrible mistake and faced the consequences. But in doing so, she had discovered something valuable. Sometimes our worst moments can lead us to our best selves, if we're brave enough to learn from them.